We talk a lot about different AI models and which one is the best, which is an important conversation to be having. But equally as important is the conversation of how do we actually prompt these models and what do we do with the result? And this conversation is about which tools we should actually use to interact with those models. And particularly when I'm trying to be the most productive with AI, especially in a coding context, I essentially have a wish list of 4 different things that I want these different tools to be doing. First, we need some kind of planning stage so that the model can tell us what exactly it's planning on doing before it actually does it, which can help prevent us from wasting a bunch of time and money. Second, we need a way to actually review the work of the model in the most transparent way possible. We can't just be blindly trusting the model, so we need a way to easily see what it actually did, why it did it, and make changes if we need to make those changes. 3, and related to that last point, is that when we do find mistakes that the models make, because none of these models are perfect and they probably won't be ever, if not for a very, very long time, is we need a way to easily tell it what mistakes it made and for it to actually be able to go and fix those mistakes. And 4th, probably the biggest goal of these AI tools is to save us time, but if we're just doing one task at a time, we're not really saving that much time, so we need parallel execution. So essentially, I want to be a supervisor while the AI tool works on a bunch of different tasks all at once. So interestingly enough, the team at Verdent reached out to show me their latest release, and seems like it could actually check all of these boxes, so I do want to give it a try. And of course, a big thank you to Verdent for sponsoring this video. So before we get into Verdent, I want to show you all the project that we're going to be working on, and some of you might remember this because we actually made it in a live stream a little while back, and it is simply an AI chatbot application called Captain Fred AI. So it's an AI chatbot, but the chatbot talks as Fred AI. And it allows you to write code and things like that as well. So let's say implement merge sort in Python. You'll see the captain is consulting his charts here, and eventually this is going to give us a result. And here is some Python code. We can see the model we're using is GPT-4o mini, but we can change it to different ones. Yeah, that is Captain Fred AI. Not going to go too deep on what exactly this is. It's just a project so that we can see how well Verdant works in a decently large code base. All right, so this is the main Verdant application. So it's worth noting there's sort of 2 different sides to this. There is Verdant, which was previously Verdant Deck, but I believe they're in the process of renaming it. And then they also have a Verdant VS Code extension. I'll show that in a moment, and I'll sort of talk about when I would use one versus the other. But first, I want to talk about the sort of standalone app that is Verdant. So when you first open it, it looks like a lot of standard AI chat applications, but it does have some cool features. So first of all, we can choose what project we're working in. In this case, this AI chat app. We can choose if we want to be in the main repository or if we want to create a new work tree. We can add some context if we want. We can add images and files. And then we can switch from agent mode to plan mode, which I like a lot because, again, sort of the first thing on that wish list was that I want the AI to plan before it does things, and I want to approve that plan. So we can do that with plan mode. Then we can choose what model to use. So we'll start with something basic, and then we'll do some harder tasks as we go. So to begin with, we will say create a plan to add basic unit testing to the repository. We can run this and we can see the task shows up down here. And this is important because we can actually run multiple tasks at once in parallel, which I will show in a moment. But first, let's just take a look at this task. So we can see it's working through this plan, and this is sort of the main interface within Verdant. So a few interesting things here. First of all, we have a file explorer, which is interesting because essentially what we have here is a full code editor. So I could open up this file here and it looks sort of like VS Code. I can just edit this. I could say hello world here, if I could spell it correctly, hello world. And this works just like a standard code editor. Now, sort of my thought on this is if you're going to be writing a lot of code yourself, I think you would rather use VS Code with the extension over there. However, if you're going to be mostly having the AI write code and then maybe making some small changes, I think using this is a better option. So we'll show more of that in a moment, but I just wanted to show you that we have that. We also have a terminal, so I can click on this and it'll open a terminal down here. And then over here on the right, we can see some information about our current branch, as well as the ability to open this in other applications, which is pretty nice. Okay, but the plan here is done. So plan, add basic unit testing to repository. We have an objective, testing stack selection, vtest, React testing library, just DOM. We have the vtest plugin for React and Happy DOM or JS DOM for DOM environment. Then we have some dependencies, some configuration files, testing directory structure, the priority. So high priority is core logic, medium priority is API and integration, and low priority is UI components. And then it also shows us how it's going to update the package JSON scripts, the mocking strategy it's going to use, the coverage goals, and the implementation order. So these steps it's actually going to take, and it has some notes down here. And if we wanted, we could tell it to edit the plan, but for now, let's simply say approve, and it's going to start actually working on that plan. Now, one thing I do like while it does this is, again, this idea of transparency. We can see what exactly it's doing step by step and what it plans to do. So for me personally, I just like this little bit of extra transparency into what the AI is doing, and it makes me feel like I can just trust it a little bit better. But of course, that said, it's still just AI, so don't blindly trust it. It's going to be wrong from time to time, and that's why in Verdant, there's a bunch of tools built in to sort of see everything it did and potentially find mistakes that it made. All right, so just finished, and we can see perfect. Let me create a summary of what was implemented. So we have a summary, configuration setup, the test files it created, 40 total tests, test scripts available, dependencies installed. And this is interesting. So we have npm test, run tests. We can run the test with UI, run tests once for CI, and we can also get tests with coverage. You can see the dependencies that were installed. Then we also get this thing called difflins, which is a good way, again, to get transparency into what the AI actually did. So you can have it auto-generate this every single time, and essentially it just describes in a slightly different way all of the changes it made, and it links to all of the different files. So for example, I could click on this file. It's going to actually open it up in this diff editor. So here's that file I just clicked on, and we can see the changes it made. In this case, it's a new file, so everything is a change, but we could see sort of the overall diff. And if we wanted, we could go through all of the changes and review this similar to how we would review a standard just code review. Also, by the way, I'm noticing it added a README to the testing directory to explain how the tests work. Love that. I love an AI that actually documents itself. So that's amazing. Now, what we can also do is we can click this code review button. And this is really interesting. So it does take a little bit to generate, but what the code review is, basically AI just generated all this code for us. So now what it does is it goes to a different AI model and it says, hey, all of this code was just generated. Do a code review on it. So it has one AI review the code of the other. Now, is this perfect? No. Is it always going to catch errors? No. Is it oftentimes going to think it caught an error from the other AI when it actually didn't? Yes, I think this is a high chance of hallucination. That said, it is just an extra safeguard we have to have one model check the other model's work to potentially find some mistakes that it might have made. And just like that, this finished. So it sort of separates it into must fix, should fix, and just suggestions. So must fix, nothing found based on the diff provided. So that's good. It didn't find any sort of major issues with the code. Then we have should fix, and it's got a bunch of things that it recommends we fix. And then it's got some suggestions to just overall make it better. And if we wanted to, we could go through all of these, decide which ones we want, and then either create a new task for it or in the same task, have the AI work on those changes. But for now, what I want to do is actually testing. So what we're going to do is open up a terminal up here. So open up a terminal panel, and in here, we can simply run the new command. So npm run test, and let's check the coverage as well. And it does look like we need to install coverage. So we can simply say yes to this. All right, so that is installed. Run this again, and there we go. Like it said, it created 40 tests and they all passed, as well as it's in 7 different test files, which all passed. And then we can come down here and we can see some stats in terms of the testing coverage. So a lot of these files are at 100% test coverage. And then the ones that aren't, we can see what lines were not covered. So for this, I think this is pretty good. So what I'm going to do is simply click this commit button, and it's going to commit this for us. And you can see it auto generates a commit message. I'll just leave it and say commit. Okay, so now that we've seen Verdant do a fairly simple task, I want to see it try to do a few larger tasks, and I want to see if it can do these tasks in parallel. So I'm going to give it 2 new unrelated tasks, however, tasks that are going to potentially use some of the same files, and see how well it's able to do both of them at the same time. So first is going to be potentially the easier of the tasks, but depends who you ask. And that's going to be to create new themes for the website and add UI so the user can switch between the various themes. Now, in addition to this, I'm going to change from the main repository to a new work tree because of the fact that we are doing 2 things that are going to be essentially working at the same part of the repository. I think having them work both in the main repository is potentially going to cause an issue. So let's do a new work tree here. That way, essentially, they're just not conflicting with each other. We'll just go to agent mode, Claude 4.5 Sonnet, and we can go ahead and run that. Now, while this is running, let's come back here. here. Let's again do a new work tree. And for this one, I'm going to do what I think is a more complex task. And that's going to be to add a feature that a lot of these AI tools have, including, for example, Verdent. And that is this rollback feature. So I'm going to come back to our new task. We are in a new work tree and say, add a rollback feature that allows the user to edit an old message they sent and go back to that point in the conversation. And we can send that as well. Okay, so the add theme switcher seems to have just finished. Add rollback is still going, but we can take a look at this. So I've successfully created new themes for the website. So we have some new themes and a theme switcher component, and we can see our diff lens here that explains it. It looks like add rollback also just completed, but first let's take a look at the add theme switcher. So I need to go ahead and run this in this current work tree. So I'm going to open up the terminal here, and we can simply say npm run dev. So let's go to run that on localhost. And here on the app, you can see it added this little palette up here. And if we click on it, we can see it gave us some different themes. I like these little icons it made on the side: Pirate, Light, Night at Sea, Emerald Isle, Sunset Voyage, Midnight Ocean, Deep Forest, and Royal Purple. Okay, so this worked pretty well. We added these themes. Of course, we could go in and have it sort of micro adjust the themes, or we could just go in to the CSS it wrote. So looks like it's mostly this global CSS here, and we could just edit these values ourselves if we really wanted to. But what I want to do instead is look at the rollback feature it implemented. I think this is the more interesting thing. So we can see the rollback feature was added, and it added an edit button on user messages, edit mode, and the rollback behavior. And we have the diff lens here. So again, let's go ahead and run this in the terminal. So npm run dev, and that is going to run this on localhost. And now we have this running. So what I want to do is go ahead and give it a test. So let's start by just saying hello, send this message, and we have the captain is consulting his charts as always. And there we go. So we have a message, and we can see we have this little edit button. There's a bit of a UI glitch going on here. We're a little bit too low, so we can see if we can fix that in a moment. But if I click edit here, we could change this, but I want to see if we go actually further into a conversation. So let's say write Python code for the factorial function. Run this, have the captain consult some charts. All right, so there's that code. And let's see if we can edit this to say something else. Let's say merge sort instead, save and roll back. Okay, so it seems like that worked to save this, but it didn't actually run the command again. So I'm going to ask it to fix that. So back in Verdant, let's say saving and roll back seems to work, but when we save, it should make a new request to the server with all of the current chat context, and let's say ending at the message from the user that was just edited. And then we can say, make sure we get a new response from the AI based on this new message. Okay, so it says perfect, the build was successful, and it has the updated behavior. So let's go back over to the browser, give this a refresh, and let's make sure that it is actually working. Let's go ahead and try the same thing again. So we can say hello, and it's going to do something. And let's say write a merge sort function in Python. And there we go. By the way, this UI we have here, one of my proudest accomplishments. It looks pretty good. Even though I'm pretty sure I used AI for like the whole thing. All right, so let's edit this and change it from merge sort to factorial, save and roll back. And it looks like we have an issue. Let's see what this is. Send message is not a function, page.tsx line 96. Let's say we are still getting an error, page.tsx line 96. And if we wanted to, we could even add a screenshot of this. Let's do that. Go like this. Come over here, and it should be this screenshot right there. There we go. Let's see if it's able to fix this. And this is sort of the classic thing with any of these AI models and any of the tools that sometimes they sort of hallucinate. In this case, it seems like it sort of made up a function. But what is good is this ability to add a screenshot, and sort of tell it like a human, hey, we have this issue. Can you go and try and fix it? Because I just think it's a easier way to give that feedback to the AI. And that was sort of the third point we had, was the AI is going to make mistakes, and we want ways to easily tell it that it made a mistake and have it go fix those mistakes for us. And all right, so it seems like it fixed it. So I'm going to rerun this again just to make sure. And just like that, we are back. Let's do the same thing again. Hello to our good buddy, Captain Fred AI. We can just go ahead and change this one if we want. So let's say hello world instead, save and roll back. It does look like that worked. So let's try adding more now. So let's say write a merge sort function in Python. We are now consulting our charts. There we go. And now let's change this. Oh, we're still typing or still writing down here. All right, now it's done. Change this to be a factorial function. Save and roll back. And there we go. Now we have a factorial function. So this does seem to be working, and it's doing exactly what we want. And if we wanted to, we could also have it sort of fix this little UI bug we have going on up here. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. I remember having a similar issue when I actually built this initially. So it has to do with the fact that we have this down here sort of pushed everything up. So we could have it go and fix that. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. The overall feature works pretty well, and we could have the AI fix that, or we could just go into the CSS and fix it ourselves. But now what I want to do is to show you the VS Code extension as well. So you can see I have the Verdent VS Code extension over here, and it looks pretty similar. It works very similarly. We still have agent mode. Here we can choose what model we want, and it does work a little bit differently. So we can choose performance, balance, or efficiency. So this essentially is going to choose the right model for us based on essentially how many credits we want to use, or we can just directly choose a model down here. Additionally, one of the other differences here is we have agent mode, plan mode, but we also have chat mode. So if we just want to ask a question like, hey, how do I do this thing in Gits or something like that, you could do that in chat mode, or you could ask it just a question about some of your code. So if I wanted to come here and say, maybe highlight this, right click, do add to Verdant, or you could do Command L. And in chat mode, I'll just say, explain what these props do. By the way, this little icon they got going on here, adorable. I love it. And there we go. So here's what each of the props does. And this is what I was sort of saying of, I think the VS Code extension is super useful if you just sort of want to be coding yourself, but have kind of that guy over your shoulder who can be there to answer any of your questions. Verdant can kind of be that for you. Or say, for example, I am trying to change the AI system prompt. Where would I need to go? And this can go look through the code base for us and hopefully find where that system prompt actually is. And there we go. We can see it actually used this Explorer here. So you can see there's these sub agents. One of them is Explorer, and you can actually create new sub agents. So essentially these are agents you can create for it to use that do specific tasks. So essentially you give it a system prompt to use, and Explorer is one of them to go find something. And that's what it did. So it looks like it is in this file here. So we can go there, and there is the system prompt right there. So it's just a super useful way to go try and find something in a code base. But at the same time, we can still use this VS Code extension just like we can use the standalone app. So I'm going to switch to agent mode, and let's actually go to a brand new chat here. And what I'm going to say is essentially what we wanted to build is this. We want like a history of chats. So let's say create a new feature for a history of chats. The user should be able to go back to their old conversations and resume them where they left off. Store these chats in local storage. There we go. Go ahead and send that. And it's going to start this in essentially that same agent mode that we saw before. Also, by the way, I think this is hilarious that it says we have a problem, unknown word, and it's R for the pirate in our little personality here. All right, we can close that, and we can see it's doing very similar to what it did before. So first, it's using the Explorer to try and find everything it needs. And we can see it sort of has these to-dos. So to-do 1, explore the code base structure and understand current chat implementation. And it's using the Explorer for this. I like how we have sort of this like progress indicator. So we have our to-dos, and we are through 0 of the steps. We can open this up and see all of the steps it's going to take. Very similar to what we saw in the standalone Verdant application as well. All right, and just like that, our feature is complete. So it finished its to-dos, it explained it all to us. We can review these changes if we want. So we can open this in VS Code's sort of diff editor. But what I want to do is simply try it out. So let's go over to the browser. And all right, we're back at Captain Fred AI, and it added this little bubble here. And if we click on this, we can see we have this nice little sidebar that actually comes out really clean. I don't love the little floating bubble thing, but it works. It opens a little sidebar, and we can open up a new chat from here if we want, or we could just do it down here. So let's say, hello world, send that. And by the way, I'm just now realizing that the UI bug of this being like cut off a little bit, it was there before. So this has nothing to do with the feature we were looking at before. That is not Verdant's fault. Apparently that is my fault from the first time I made this. But okay, we now have this here and cool. So we have this chat here. And if we click new chat, it's going to come back here. And let's say, write a function in Python. Write anything. There we go. We have a function in Python. And now we should be able to open this. And I don't love that this covers that. Not perfect UI, but we could move that around. And let's... Cool. So we can actually go back and forth between our chats. And what happens if I refresh the page? Let's give it a refresh. And yeah, they actually do persist, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, one thing, I'm going to ask it to move this little bubble because like I said, I don't really like it very much. So let's come back to VS Code and let's say this works perfectly. Great job. We need to be nice and encouraging to our engineer here. Now, instead of the floating bubble to open the sidebar, just add a hamburger icon to the top left of the nav bar. And there we go. It looks like it just finished it. We can see the changes, or we can simply come over here. And there we go. We have a little hamburger icon. I think that's much cleaner. It's not covering these things up anymore. Yeah, we can go right back to these and I could say something like explain this function more. And it should know what function I'm talking about because we are still in this chat. And here we go. It's explaining the calculate rectangle area, which is the function up here. So yeah, that is Verdant. I do think it essentially hits all 4 points of that wish list I had. Of course, it's still not going to be perfect. It is still AI, and all of these AI tools we have are still reliant on the same models. Luckily, those models are getting better and better and better, but we are still using the same models, or at least better versions of them over time. But we need to be cautious with anything we're doing. They're going to make mistakes. We saw that in this video, but really, I think what sets apart one tool from the next is the ability to interact with that model in the easiest way possible, the ability to tell that model what mistakes it made and for it to sort of get itself unstuck, if that makes sense. But anyways, I did like Verdant a lot, so I probably will be using it more in the future. And of course, a big thank you again to them for sponsoring this video. And if you do want to give Verdant a try, you can go to Verdant AI. And of course, let me know what you think.